There is a supernatural world that surrounds us. Sometimes it manifests to people like you and me. You hear stories about this so much more right here on Supernatural Confrontations. I have a guest. His name is Larry, and he reached out to me with some very interesting stories, and we'll be sharing that right here. But first, a word from our very trusted sponsor. You probably think your 401k is safe, that it's growing, that it'll be enough for your retirement. But what if it's not? Here's the truth, folks. Your 401k was never designed to make you wealthy. It was created in a corporate boardroom to shift retirement costs and investment risks onto you. Designed to keep your money trapped, exposed to Wall Street crashes, inflation, and uncertainty you can't control. Until now. Folks, Americans are taking back control by turning to real assets like gold. Noble Gold Investments has helped thousands protect your future by converting part of their retirement savings into physical gold. Talk to Noble Gold today and learn how safe and easy it is to roll over your 401k into a tax-advantaged gold IRA without penalties or headaches. Visit noblegoldinvestments.com. That's noblegoldinvestments.com to get your free wealth protection kit, including a step-by-step guide to get started. That's noblegoldinvestments.com. It's time to get your money out of the danger zone and into something real. And folks, get rewarded for getting started. Open a qualified account at noblegoldinvestments.com, and Noble Gold will send you 2 5-ounce Silver America, the beautiful coins free. Once again, folks, noblegoldinvestments.com. So, Larry, thanks so much for coming on the record.
Sure.
Let's talk about what you went through, and specifically in India.
So I've worked in the film industry since 1990, and I didn't know when I got started in animation that I would end up being a globe-trotting animator and animation director. So I'd started out in Hollywood, worked on my first project was Tiny Toons, working for Steven Spielberg as my producer, and went on from there into theatrical features and Space Jam and Tigger movie, many other projects. And one of my projects was doing a Playmobil video, which is a toy brand. It's more popular in Europe. And a lot of people might see that on the shelf and think that it's Legos because it has a similar look to it, but it's not a builder's set. So we were taking that idea, that IP, and turning it into an animated video. And so we were working with Canada. I was working in LA and with India, Trivandrum, India, which is where this experience happened. And I'd been there twice for the production. And the first time that I went there, nothing out of the ordinary happened. And, excuse me. And I met several people, made a couple friends, and then came back to the States. And I brought my assistant animation director with me the second time. Now, I was the animation director on the project, working with the director and the technical director. And I had gone to the Arabian Sea. The place where I was staying is called Trivandrum. It's got a much longer name. They went back to their original name, and it's so long, I can't possibly. But the area, I believe it's in Kerala, it is near the tip of India and right on the Arabian coast. So I had gone out to have seafood with a couple of friends. And when we came back into the city, I thought, you know what? I'm going to stay in the hotel. There's a hotel there called the Mascot Hotel. And it's kind of the Ritz-Carlton of that area, but extremely affordable. So I thought, I'm going to stay at the nice hotel tonight, get some sleep. You know, it was a long trip.
Yeah.
Still recovering from the jet lag and all that.
Absolutely. Well, sure. Right. It's a long flight. Halfway around the world from Los Angeles, literally.
Exactly.
Literally.
Almost exactly. It might be a little bit further. It's only, you might be heading back.
Yeah, exactly. I get it. Wow.
So I'm in my hotel room. I fell asleep. I had both the lights on, had the TV going, and I think it was on a Christian, happened to be on a Christian station. And I got woken up when I jumped in my sleep, or shoved, it felt like. And I've jumped in my sleep before and never thought anything of it. So I sat up and I went to go turn the light off. I was like, oh, I left the TV on. I'm going to turn the TV off, turn the lights off. And when I reached for the light, it started to dim. And I wasn't surprised at all. I'm in India, and I thought, oh, we're having a brownout. Here we go. And I looked behind me, though, at the other side of the lamp, because I'm in a big king-size bed. I'm like, well, that lamp's not dim. And as I'm looking at it, because I'm awake now, sitting up in bed, the darkness that had started with that one lamp overshadowed me, and it went to the other light. And the best way that I can describe it, it was as if something was sucking the light out of the room.
Wow.
Now, I've never experienced anything like this before or since. Wasn't looking for it, don't want it, was already a believer. But what happened next is like a milestone. It's almost like if the enemy's playing poker and they're supposed to remain hidden, they're supposed to, lurk in the shadows. It's like they dropped a couple aces on the table by accident. That's how how I would describe it. So I can't go backward from this experience. There is no way that you could convince me that what happened didn't happen, and that Jesus Christ is exactly who he says he is based on what transpired. Now, I already believe that. And I think if I hadn't, and that experience had happened, it would have been a totally different experience.
Sure.
So I turn, and it's got vaulted ceilings, right? Really, really high ceilings. And I look up, and I see this black mass manifesting in the room. And if you've ever gone swimming with a diving mask on, like in a pool, and everything's really clear,
Right.
imagine looking up. Everything's crystal clear. The room is clear. And someone has a big 5-gallon bucket of black India ink, and they dump it slowly down on top of you in the pool, and you see that blackness drifting toward you.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it was like. And as this was happening, it was more real. That black mass, it was more real than the room was real. It had more form than objects in the room had form. So I've never experienced anything that was more real than reality. Well, how is that possible? Because all I know is reality. And it was blacker than the blackest black. It was beyond jet black. I've been spelunking before in Australia. When I was working for Disney down in Australia, we went spelunking, which is caving, in one of the caves. And in the middle of the cave, we turned out all the lights to experience what total darkness was. I don't know how to describe this. I don't know how this is possible, LA, but it was blacker and darker than the absence of light.
Wow.
And yet it had form. I got a sense that it had form and volume, and as I said before, more real than the room. So how is something that is completely devoid of light, how can you see form? I don't know, but I could. So as I'm looking at this thing and it's growing in the room, the whole room is overshadowed in this kind of dull darkness. And these two tendrils, and before I say this, I grew up in the Baptist church. I'm a non-denominational Christian. I am not a Pentecostal, although I might be a little bit more Pentecostal now than I was after what happened. These two tendrils dropped down out of the cloud, and they touched my tongue.
Whoa.
So my father was the major of the fire department of Oklahoma City, and I moved out to Los Angeles in 1990, just to give you a context of how this happened. And this was, I'm going to guess, probably around 2008, 9, maybe 10. And I even wrote all this down on the receipt of the hotel room, because I said on the receipt, it says, when what happened in India. And I thought, I'm never going to forget this. So when I was a kid, my dad had always told me, do not play with the electrical outlets. So of course, by the time I was about 4 years old, I thought it would be a brilliant idea if I took a house key and I stuck it into the electrical outlet.
My God.
And when I did, I felt this electric, current going through me, and I couldn't move. until I finally was able to let go of the key. So when those two tendrils came down and touched my tongue,
Same thing.
it was very much like that. It was the closest thing that I could describe to what it felt like. And I could not move. Now, with all this happening, you'd think that I'd be terrified or afraid, and I wasn't. I don't know why I wasn't, but slowly, I can't move. I finally just have to force these words out. They just popped in my head. It was like breathing. And this wasn't like my body was taken over by some force. It wasn't like that. It was me. And I just said, "The Lord is holy." And it was, finally got it out. And as soon as I did, this black mass turned flatter than if you put a drop of that India ink on a microscope slide and put the other glass on top of it to make it perfectly flat. It turned flatter than that. And it was as if something grabbed it and pulled it out of the room, or it fled. And it didn't go through the wall. It kind of slicked through the spaces of the world that I could see. I don't know any way else to describe it. Suddenly it looked kind of fake, as if something like a bad special effect. And it was as if someone, ripped a tablecloth off a table doing a magic trick or cool thing.
Right.
It was gone. It was just like that. Gone. And, and this is happening. I'm like, what in the world just happened? I had a demon come in my room. You didn't have to explain it to me. I didn't wonder about it, and I wasn't afraid. In fact, I was angry. I knew instinctively that it didn't have permission to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt kind of violated. Like, how dare you touch me? Who do you think you are? And I immediately got on the phone to a couple of friends of mine from church in Los Angeles. And at the time, I was going to a really small church. I think it grew out of a house church. It's connected to a lot of churches in China. They're loosely connected to various fellowships throughout the U.S. And one of the brothers, who at the time I believe was in his 80s, and he's passed away now, I called him up and I said, "Floyd, I'm in Trivandrum, India, and this happened, and I am not seeing things. I've never had a hallucination before, never heard voices, and I'm telling them what happened." And he said, "Larry, have you been talking about Jesus?" I said, "Well, no, not really. The people there had asked me, about my life, and I probably mentioned what I believe in, but I haven't been preaching or anything." And he said, "Oh, yes, you have." And I'm thinking, what are you talking about? And he said, "You have upset the local gods,
Mm-hmm.
and we're going to be praying for you." And when he said this, I'm thinking, what are you talking about? Local gods? And I got on the phone then with another brother from the same fellowship. And I told him, he goes, "Yeah, we're going to be praying about this." And jumped in the shower, took a shower, and went back to bed. The next 3 days, I probably slept maybe 2 hours over the course of the next 3 days.
Wow.
And then the day after this happened, I went to that same seafood restaurant on the coast with my assistant director. Now, I was there to kind of get him introduced to everybody, and then I was going to leave. And he's going to stay in India, and I'm going to go back and direct the crew in Los Angeles. So we're in the middle of the day, out in the open, eating, and I'm like, I got to go wash my hands. I've been eating, boiled shrimp. And their bathroom there's just a little outhouse. That's all it is. There's nothing else around. All of the areas to eat and go are like open canopy. There's no hard roof or anything. And I prop the door open and I'm about to get in, and I hear this sound behind me. And I look behind me, and there's a little short, tiny, fat palm tree. Maybe it's 1.5 feet, 2 feet tall, maybe. And there's no palm fronds on it, but there are 4 or 5 dead palm fronds on the ground, flat as a pancake. There's nothing there. And the best way I can describe this sound is, if you've ever heard a Tasmanian devil, And I, being the one that I animated on Space Jam,
Right.
being the one that I animated for Warner Brothers, because I worked on the Tasmania show. I'm talking about the real things. I used to watch a lot of nature video. And it sounded kind of like that, this growling and snarling, except it sounded kind of like it was running on a tape backward. And now I'm scared. Like, and I prop the door open and I'm washing my hands. I'm like, in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, get out of here. And it stops. Now, I haven't told anybody else what's going on yet, except my two friends from the fellowship. I didn't tell my assistant director. And as far as I could tell, that was all the paranormal aspect of what happened was over. Now, something else happened. I'll tell you off camera, and you'll know why when I tell you off camera. It wasn't anything I could see. It wasn't anything I could hear, but it was like impressions. And the best way I can describe that, I'll go into detail about that off camera, was one time when I was driving from Oklahoma to California. I'd been visiting my dad and was driving back. I was in a mini SUV, and I suddenly got this strong impression. It wasn't a voice, but it was as close to being a voice without being an audible voice. And it was like, slow down right now. And I did. I hit the brakes. And it's pitch black at night. It's nighttime. I'm going, Texas, it's like 70 miles or 75 miles an hour minimum.
Yeah, minimum. Right.
And I was probably going 80 or 85.
Sure. Been there classes.
Yeah. And when I slowed down, there's no traffic or anything. When I slowed down about 3 or 4 seconds later, there is a herd of deer in front of me.
Oh my God.
Off the road. And I hit a boom, and it damaged the bumper. The bumper's halfway off. And I get out, and the other deer like, hey, we're sorry, but it wasn't us. And they take off. They all left. So that deer I hit, I have no idea if it survived or not. They're pretty hardy animals. And it looked down on the bumper, and there's fur embedded in the bumper. When it hits, it opens up to absorb the shock. So that impression that I got of slow down right now is kind of like the impression I got later before I left India. I got some impressions like that. But clearly, I think what had happened was I was having some kind of positive effect for God. There's a scripture that says, don't let your right hand know what your left hand is doing. I didn't know I was doing it. I wasn't openly preaching. At least I didn't think I was. I wasn't, preaching the gospel per se. I let people know what I believe. But it makes me wonder about other things that had happened while I was there. So the director and myself and the technical director, this is before all this had happened, went on a houseboat trip in India on one of the rivers. And when we're out on the houseboat, there's a little canoe that came up, and our captain said, oh, he wants to take you into some of the rice paddies in that small little boat, and you can go travel through there and meet some of the villagers and things like that. So we get on there, and we end up on this plot of land that's probably maybe 50% larger than my animation studio here at home. And it is packed with people. And they're all having some kind of a festival, and they've got Shiva on a plate with all this fruit around it. And so they're asking me, come on, come in. And then they're making the prayer symbol, pray to Shiva. And I'm like, I can't do that.
I'm praying to Shiva.
Said, no. No, come on. I said, I can't do that. And obviously nobody there speaks English, or if they do, they speak only a little. And I finally said, I can't. I'm a Christian. I cannot do this. And they pushed me out of the crowd, like, get out of here, get away from us. All the old guys did. All the young people pulled me back into this crowd. I mean, it is packed. So we're all dancing around. Of course, I'm not praying to their God.
Jeez.
And this kid, this little boy, he's probably 3 years old, yanks on my pants, and he's looking up at me. And I look down, and he goes, hi. And I went, hi. And then he yanked on my leg again. And he goes, hi. I said, hi. And the third time he did it, I bent down and I said, remember this name. I don't know if this kid knows English at all. He's only about 3. I said, remember this name. Remember Jesus. Just remember Jesus. That, for all I know, could have been the thing that shook up the enemy. I don't know. Well, we're dancing around. We go back to the back of this, and there's a tree there. I think it's palm tree, some kind of a tree, and it's got a spigot that's been knocked into it, and they've been fermenting tree sap into basically white lightning, if you know what that is.
Yeah, it's like,
So they make drinks for everybody, and I take a sip, like, whoa, it was super strong. So we get back on the boat, and that's it. And then I had that experience. I can't remember if that was the first trip that I went on. The demonic entity experience was the second trip. But the most incredible thing to me was that I didn't have to think about what to say.
right,
I wasn't afraid.
right.
God, Spirit, through my voice and my mouth, basically said, "Get out of here," and it did.
Wow.
And if I hadn't known the Lord, I personally think that thing would have gotten inside of me.
Oh, I'm sure. India is a bastion, is steeped in false religion and the worship of countless gods and goddesses. And yes, there's missionaries and there's Christians who have been in there. But I mean, just look at the result of karma and reincarnation and the caste system. I mean, it's all. And then you got, and I'm sure you saw some of these guys when you were there, the wandering sadhus and the Mahatmas and the holy men. I was in the ashram for 3 years. Everybody got to go to India except for me and 2 other people or 3 other people. We stayed in the ashram and held the fort down, while the rest of the ashram went to India and celebrated the gurus, whatever. So I never got there, and I've always wanted to go. That's probably the Lord's providence that I didn't go there. I mean, who knows what would have happened? But the area is steeped in the occult. And I think what you came up against was not a demon. I think it was a principality.
Well,
Not conjecture. That's conjecture.
yeah, I mean, to make a conjecture, I can tell you this. The other thing I specifically remember saying when I jumped out of bed verbally, I said, "Man, this place is dark." It just kind of like, it was like, whoa, I had no idea how dark India was. It is dark. And I was in,
It really has. No, it is. Absolutely.
and the area that I was in, the Apostle Thomas was said to have come down. The locals told me this. And there's a church there, St. Thomas's Church. And so that area is about 15% Christian. And what I think most people don't realize is India as a whole, outside of that area I was in, is maybe 4%. At least at the time I was there, they guesstimate that it was 4 to 5% Christian. That's it.
Wow.
And the rest of it, the majority is Hindu, and then large Muslim communities. So, I personally think, and I can go into that as to why now or some other time. I don't know that fallen angels, whatever they are the same thing as demons. And I don't know if the fallen angels are even on earth right now. If they're not, I do think they're going to be again at some point. I personally think that they were locked up. And I base that on, there's a scripture in Jude that talks about having them locked up in gloomy chambers.
Right.
My personal feeling is that they are so bad that God locked them up. Like if they were allowed to roam around, the destruction that they would cause, the spiritual destruction, and through that probably great physical destruction that they would cause would dampen God's purpose for his church, because he's calling his kids home basically over time, right? Whatever time is, we don't know what time is. And so I don't know this. I'm of the belief, the whole Genesis 6 idea, which I know that you're familiar with.
Very much so.
I don't think demons are fallen angels.
No, I don't believe so. In my wheelhouse, demons are the disembodied spirits of a Nephilim destroyed in the flood and also afterwards. Like the spirit of Goliath would be a demon.
Yes. And that's why I think if I wasn't a believer, it would have gotten inside my body, because it doesn't have one.
Right.
It
wants one. Right.
Yeah. And so, who knows? I understand what you're saying. I don't know what that means. Who knows? Maybe there are fallen angels that are of a lesser order, roaming around. I personally think it's demons all the time, and they're waiting for their parents to be let out of jail, so to speak.
That's a really good point, because we know they are going to be let out. But remember, a third of the host falls with Lucifer. We don't know that number. So I believe fallen angels are alive and well and doing what they do. The demons are lesser, but it's complex. And, when was the last time anybody sat down and interviewed a fallen angel? I mean, it's not going to happen. So a lot of it's conjecture, and we don't know. Larry, thanks so much for coming on. Really, it's an incredible story. And you know what? India is a very dark place, very, very dark, as well as China. I mean, they are steeped in centuries of witchcraft. And
my wife's Chinese.
Well, there you go. I mean, so
when we were in, I was working in Indonesia. I was working in the other room. I had a studio in my apartment there, as well as I was running a studio as the chief creative officer. And she was calling me, but I couldn't hear her. She had some dark entities come in the room. I didn't see this. And she started praying, and they slowly backed away and faded away. And I talked to our pastor there about that, who's American. And I told him the story about India too. And he goes, yeah, I'm not surprised. He goes, that's really common. And
very much so. Yeah, very much so.
And he said, especially if you're a Christian. Yeah. Hey, could I mention my website?
I want you to. And before you do that, do you know Gil Zimmerman?
I don't think so.
Animation director, work at DreamWorks and Disney for 30 years back at.
I might. You know what? Let me.
How to Tame Your Dragon?
Oh yeah, I wasn't there at the time. That was DreamWorks. How to Train Your Dragon was DreamWorks.
Yeah, Gil's my business partner. We just finished a film on the Shroud of Turin together, and before that, we did 10 films on the whole UFO phenomena. But please,
I guarantee you, we know some of the same people.
I'm sure you do. Mention your website, Larry, how folks can check you out.
Sure. Well, my main site, I've written a book, and actually a little bit of this, the influence of this experience is in the book, but it's a fictional story, and it's got a lot of conjecture, but it's an action adventure thriller, not a story. But just go to Larry Whitaker Author, and Whitaker is WHITAKER, LarryWhitakerAuthor.com. I'm launching the book in mid-October.
Okay.
And I'm kind of, with AI and everything, the whole industry is just like, they don't know what's going to happen.
I know. Nobody does. Nobody's
totally upside down right now.
It is. I get it.
So I'm going into some of the other creative areas. I've written screenplays, and I've been a screenplay doctor, and, done storyboards and story work in animation in the past. I've worked on live action too. In fact, I did a film with a giant ape with Charlize Theron and Bill Paxton. I was working on that, called Mighty Joe Young, just before I went to India. I went on to another job and went to India. But it was a few years later, to India. But having seen a lot of special effects and that kind of thing, this was so unlike anything I've seen. Although I will say, when I got back, there was a movie that was released maybe a couple months after I got back, called A Haunting in Connecticut.
I remember that. I didn't see it, and I do remember it.
And the movie poster is this kid from a profile looking up, and his mouth's open, and this black
thing,
billowy shape,
just like you saw.
I was driving by it. I was in Pasadena driving by the billboard, and I was like, "Whoa, that's the closest thing to me seeing an image of what I saw in India." But it paled in comparison, because it wasn't blacker than the blackest black.
Wow.
But you get the idea.
Larry, thanks so much for coming on the record. Really appreciate it. Folks, the supernatural world is real, and it manifests. And the whole purpose of shows like this is to warn the body of Christ, put on your armor of God, walk in that armor on a daily basis, and understand that we're fighting against powers and principalities and wickedness in high places. And that's never changed, and it's never going to change until the King returns. Thanks so much for watching. Larry, thanks so much for coming on. We'll see you again soon. Folks, the website's been down. I think it's back up again, doing a lot of maintenance there. Check out Larry's website. Don't forget the Holy Fire, Holy Shroud film. You can watch 34 films for $4.99 each. So go check us out, lamarzulli.com. Thanks so much for watching. See you again soon.